Welcome to the 128th season of the Canadian Club Toronto, Canada's Podium. For over a century, this platform has been a gathering place for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to discuss the most pressing issues of our time.
We've been having important discussions and debates around this podium in this country for well over a century. I call this a historic podium of record.
Our club's always been a forum for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to command attention to the issues of our time.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to those joining us online. My name is Shazanne Chu, President-elect of Canadian Club Toronto, and your host. The 94 calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation's final report cover a wide range of topics, including child welfare, education, health, language and culture, and justice. TRC number 92 is a call to action for companies to integrate reconciliation into how they operate and interact with Indigenous communities. We're about to learn what has been done and what is left to be done from our panel of experts. At a time when issues of sovereignty are top of mind, matters of Indigenous sovereignty must be prioritized. Our ability to discuss these timely topics is based on the contribution of our partners and sponsors. Today's event sponsors are Deloitte and our streaming sponsor, Canada Life. We appreciate your generous support. We are grateful that Canadian Bankers Association is our season sponsor and that Air Canada is our official airline sponsor. Canada's Forest Trust Corporation is our smart forest planting partner and supports our goal of reducing the club's carbon footprint. We warmly welcome students from the University of Toronto's Monk School of Global Affairs, as well as from the university's Indigenous Studies program. You want to give us a wave to where y'all are? Over there, great. And we also welcome students from York University's Public Policy and Administration as well. There you go. Thank you. Before the panel introductions, I invite you to visit our website at canadianclub.org for event and membership information and encourage you to share information about today's events on your favorite social media platforms. Today is a unique opportunity to ask our esteemed panel about the nation's efforts at economic reconciliation. Please take a moment to fill out the Q&A cards on your table. Our team will collect and share them with our moderator. And for those joining remotely, please hit the red Q&A button on the right side of your screen when we open the floor for questions. And now, I am pleased to introduce our panel members. Tabitha Bull is President and CEO of the Canadian Council for Indigenous Business. She is a proud member of the Nipissing First Nation. She supports the Indigenous economy and serves on many boards, including Dexterra, Wigwaman, and the Ontario Chamber. Cody Penner is the Vice President of Corporate Development at Nations Royalty, which is the first majority-owned Indigenous publicly traded company in Canada. Cody From Tahltan Nation, rose from underground miner to strategist at Canada's top diversified mining firm. Sharon Singh is partner and co-head of the Indigenous and Environment practice at Macmillan LLP. Thank you for traveling from Vancouver to be with us today. Sharon advises on Indigenous, environmental, and human rights issues across sectors like mining, energy, and infrastructure, crafting equity deals and benefit agreements that guide projects on treaty lands. Varun Srivatsan is the Director, Policy and Strategic Engagement at RBC. Varun led Canada's Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program and served as an economist in Parliament. He continues to advise on Indigenous economic issues and bridging public-private insights to advance strategic policy. Karen Rastool, our moderator today, is the Senior Fellow and Director of Indigenous Affairs at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Karen, from Dokis First Nation, is a national voice on Indigenous governance and economic reconciliation. She contributes to media, speaks globally, and brings deep insight as a valued director of our club. This is Karen's last event as a director, and we are so grateful for the important conversation she has brought to Canadian Club members and guests. We know this one will not disappoint. Karen, panelists, Canada's podium is yours.
I should have made a request for a walk-up song for my last stint as a board member. Hello, everyone, and welcome. See a lot of familiar faces in the room. I also know that there are folks in the room today who have a sense of humor, and so I'm hoping that everybody brought theirs today, because as deep as we're going to get, and yes, there are serious issues and matters to be discussed. In particular, at this point in time, it's important that we maintain the very sacred protocol of humor as we drive forward through these conversations. So June 2025 marks 10 years since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission issued its final report and issued 94 calls to action to Canadians across the country, challenging them in playing a serious role in advancing reconciliation. In particular, Justice Murray Sinclair called on Canadians to restore trust and respect in the Indigenous Crown relationship. And we've seen over the last 10 years all of the good developments that we've made on that front. And everyone, in my view, Indigenous nations, government, business, financial sector, everyone has really pulled through here to make good a situation that for far too long was not, did not support fairness and equity. Call to action number 92 in particular called on the business sector, the corporate sector, corporate Canada, to build partnerships, to open up access to opportunity for nations, to contribute to reconciling Canadian economy, but also to reconciling local Indigenous economies as well. And what does this mean? Well, it's never intended, reconciliation is never intended to be a charity. It's just good business. It strengthens Canada and brings us together in more ways than one. When we look at the last decades, we're here with a very esteemed panel, and we'll spend the next 30 to 40 minutes talking about all of the good things that have come along, like equity. We saw equity stakes in major projects. Great to see the First Nation Major Projects Coalition team, which is represented at that table there, move things along on the National Loan Guarantee front, ensuring that there is a workaround for nations who are wanting to secure capital to enter in as business partners in major project development in our country. A huge win for everyone. We also see First Nations investing a lot of money, and Cody can talk to us a little bit more about that, of their own capital, doing what people across North America have been doing for years, which is, taking their money and making more money with their money, which is something that nations have been doing more and more of in the last decade. And of course, the rise of Indigenous businesses. I feel like every event you go to now, there's Indigenous entrepreneurs and businesses that are present, forming part of procurement for many companies and organizations across the country. And it's really great to see that come along. But most importantly, and if any of you read what I write, reconciliation needs to be measured. I always say this isn't a Disney movie. It's not a romantic exercise. Reconciliation is really about results. So thank you to everyone here for joining the conversation and for listening, but also a reminder that there are cue cards on your table where you can flag a question. And don't hold back. I'm known to be spicy. I can take spicy conversations. If there's a burning question that you have, feel free to send it our way. I've also selected here some speakers who are in no means shrinking violets. They are able to receive those questions accordingly. All right, so we'll start with a round of self-introduction. I'm not being rude. Anishinaabe protocol requires each to introduce themselves in the way that they choose to the room. And so for this discussion here today, I'm going to be passing on the mic, so to speak, to each of our guests here to introduce themselves in the way that they see fit. Do you want to get us started?
Sounds good. First of all, thank you to the Canadian Club for convening this important conversation. Thank you, Welcome, for that beautiful welcome and acknowledgement. My name is Varun Srivatsan. I hail from Singapore, India, and I've called Canada home, and I've been welcomed to Canada 10 years ago. So the TRC and the calls to action and the work of the Commission holds a special personal significance to me, because I recall as a scrawny 18-year-old coming to this country and learning about Justice Murray Sinclair, learning about the work that he's been leading, and inspiring me to work on a process of educating myself and learning about this country, its people, and its history. And I believe that's my personal responsibility, and that's what I bring to my day job at the Royal Bank of Canada. I'm the Director of Policy and Thought Leadership, and we help inspire and inform Canadian prosperity. And we believe Indigenous economic reconciliation is central to all those efforts. And prior to this, I had the privilege of working with an incredible team of public servants, but also Indigenous leaders and corporate Canada to help pull together the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program. It was a highlight of my career so far, but really underscored the importance of what economic reconciliation could really look like. So it's a real privilege to be part of this conversation.
Ani, Tabitha Indigenous, Nipissing Indigenous, Mijici Dodem, good afternoon. My name is Tabitha Bull. I am a member of Nipissing First Nation near North Bay, Ontario. Our family clan is the Eagle. I'm partially Dokis, our cousin community, so Karen and I are for certain related. It's really a pleasure to be here.
This is not nepotism. She's not a nepo hire.
We're all related. I am the mom to two boys and a daughter and sister, which are my most important jobs. I have the honor of leading the Canadian Council for Indigenous Business, of which we have a table of board members and some of my team here. So I'm really proud of the work that we do and eager to get into the conversation. And thank you to Karen for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Miigwech.
Hey, everybody. Cody Penner, very excited to be here with such an amazing panel. I was very blessed and honored to be sitting up here with some of my old friends and new ones. I'm a Tahltan First Nation member from the Zenley family and the Wolf Clan, and I'm Vice President of Corporate Development at Nations Royalty. And when we talk about reconciliation and how things have progressed, I like to think Nations Royalty is a big step in that, or one step in that. And over the past 10 years, how Indigenous people have created a financial ecosystem that's allowing us to grow our wealth and make our money, make money, make money. That's Karen politely put it. So very excited to talk with you guys about what we do at Nations Royalty, my thoughts on the rest of the financial ecosystem in the Indigenous space, and how we're connecting the dots on this. Because if you look at history and how capital was built and created, you can leverage different things. You can have human resources, machines, capital, technology, which is a newer one, software, and you can leverage money to create wealth. And I think that we're coming up on that era for Indigenous people to really start leveraging our capital and growing true wealth for our kids and their kids. So happy to be here.
Sharon Singh. I was going to make a joke about 5 Indians and a fern, but there's no fern. So I can't make that joke, but you can still laugh. Thank you. Karen said it was okay. So I do practice out of Vancouver, but my practice is national, Musqueam, Squamish, and Swallowtail territory. I am actually just here for this event, so I do want to make this event feel special. Like Varun, also an immigrant, moved here, family originally hails from Kashmir. If anybody knows about it, it's also a war zone, so I've got that street cred as well. That's the only street cred I have, because my bio is I'm a lawyer, and not everybody wants me to wax lyrical about what lawyers do, because we do some really awesome, great stuff, and it's magical. And you should hire us, and my colleagues are right there. In terms of the topic, I know you wanted us to share some thoughts, and everybody did so. And hopefully, I don't take us totally off track. I do have notes, but I've always struggled with defining reconciliation, and TRC sort of the vision there was the establishment and maintaining respectful relationships. And then as that legal sort of hat kicks in, you're looking at balancing the interests of the rights that existed of Indigenous communities, pre-existing rights, with those rights that, frankly, we think we acquired when we arrived here. And so there's a famous saying by one of the Chief Justices about, let's face it, we're all here to stay. And my question's always been, how? And I say the how because we do have differing opinions on the how. There is the one camp that just says, let's just all get along. Let's put the past behind us. And then there's another camp that says, reconciliation is a first step towards decolonization, and decolonization should lead to Indigenous legal orders coming into play, replacing the Canadian legal system as we know it. And so when I think about reconciliation in my mind, it's a broad topic. And my narrow sphere, and I with all due respect to myself, is really influenced by the practice which I have, which again is more natural resources, infrastructure, and project focused. The TRC calls to action and tablet that I touched on this in our previous discussion actually is far broader. And I think we're only going to touch on a very narrow piece of that. And I do want this crowd to know that the TRC, if you haven't read it, please do, not just the calls to action, but the entire compilation, find the time to do so, because it is a lot more broader. And I don't think we will do justice to the conversation in this room, but know that my lens is going to be narrow. It's going to be my boring legal background, both policy and legal, that I'll bring to the table. So,
all the exciting stuff. How many people were here last year in June for this lunch? Anybody? Okay, so this joke will fall for 3 people. But you'll notice last year, I commented on how I'd pulled together a wonderful womanal because we were represented by all women. And this year, and I talked about how they weren't diversity, it was, purely brought in by expertise. And I've done so again this year, purely brought in by expertise. And I just want to note that for those who were here last year for the full female panel, Varun and Cody earned their way on stage.
It was hard work. It's been a year.
So it took two fabulous, fantastic, really smart men to disturb my womanal strategy. So congratulations. All right, we're going to hop into it. There are 3 rounds of questions, and I will do my best to make sure that we give each the attention that it deserves. It's really quite simple. Where are we now? What was it like 10 years ago? How far did we come? And where are we going in 10 years from now? And so I'll turn to Tabitha to kick us off on that conversation.
Sure, thank you. So where are we now? So CCIB is an organization that supports Indigenous economy. We've been around over 40 years, so there is definitely some history there. But our role is really to support Indigenous businesses and entrepreneurs with the support of building bridges with corporate Canada, government, and other organizations. And if I look at, just my time at CCIB, which I'm coming up on 7 years, and the growth that we've seen in Indigenous business in Canada, it's exponential growth. We are now seeing, just from a StatsCan report, over 70,000 businesses reported under StatsCan, but that doesn't include community-owned businesses, ECDEV corporations who are growing and continuing to add businesses to their communities as well. And we see these businesses in every sector, in every size, participating from an entrepreneur business, coffee company as an example, who's currently in 11 restaurants, for those of you who are familiar with the Maple Leafs restaurants here in Toronto, to businesses, a brewery here in Toronto who has just got their beer into LCBO, which is quite an extraordinary feat actually for a small craft brewery, to large businesses who are in the defense sector. There's an Indigenous business member who's currently doing the retrofits of the galleys on our submarines with the defense sector, to businesses like Boucher Contracting in Fort McMurray, who continues to grow their business. They're now taking on a project management arm who will be doing project management for government facilities in Calgary and Edmonton. So, there still are biases that exist out there. There's still times where we're meeting with corporate Canada or our government that seem to think that working with Indigenous business is more risky or it might cost more. There's still a lot of biases that we need to break down and continue to show examples of Indigenous businesses who are continuing to grow and continuing to participate in every economy across every province and in every sector. And I think we're seeing that growth for a few different reasons. One, definitely TRC 92 has helped that. We've seen growth just within our own organization of membership. So back, we just looked up, in 2015, we had 470 members, and we closed 2024 with 2,600 members. And that's that's both a growth in Indigenous businesses that are our members and also in non-Indigenous businesses who are looking to work with Indigenous business and looking to understand what their role is in reconciliation and how they can answer the call of TRC 92. And we're seeing that, from every sector of non-Indigenous businesses as well, where our membership, typically initially was major banks and resource extraction companies, kind of those companies who had triggered the duty to consult, who maybe had to understand how better to work with communities, to now companies like Uber and Starbucks and consulting firms who are really understanding the history of our country and wanting to understand how they can do better. And that's, such a positive for us and our team who does this work every day. It's very encouraging for us to see many different sectors try to understand what impact they can have and how they can do better. And if we think just about Uber as an example, the opportunity for Uber to really understand missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and how can they be part of a solution for safe ride homes for women and girls in major centers. The more that we can bring in different sectors and a varied group of companies and corporations to this space, the more that we can actually work together to support and move forward, not just in moving business forward, but also in reconciliation. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about 92 and how it has to work with all of the other calls. It really can't stand on its own. And when we see now too major projects and the work that FNMPC is doing, and the work that's happening through the loan guarantees, it's only going to enable more communities to be able to build more businesses. I think when we get to the where do we have to go, we can talk about what's happening up the street. There's definitely work to be done, and as much as we're making progress, it is sometimes a bit of a, as we said, a step back for 2 steps forward, but there's more and more people on this journey with us, and that definitely provides optimism.
Yeah, there are lovers and there are fighters in every marriage, correct? Yeah. We'll let you guess who the fighters are in this one. So is it Red Tape, the brewery?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes.
So I've been following them.
Yeah.
It's great to hear that they're going
Red
to
Tape Brewery.
LCBO.
For those of you who are hockey parents, they're located right near Ted Reeve Arena in the eastern part of town. But yeah, she's now getting into LCBO, which has been like a huge journey for her trying to get in there. And it's she's an Inuit brewer. It's quite exciting.
Yeah, and I love the name Red Tape. So meaningful from so many different ways. All right, over to you, Sharon.
All right, I'm going to have 2 frames on this, the government and policy frame. And I know we're meant to focus on 92, but I think the government policy frame really influences business. Maybe I'll start out, my practice is national as well, but I want to start off in BC first, where I think we've really led the way in terms of, and let me preface this. I'm going to say this prior to the BC election, in terms of the current state, and I'll put my little asterisk there, prior to the Trump election, and then frankly, prior to the most recent federal election. So take some of my comments as sort of referencing the era before. So BC, I think, has led the way in terms of showing what the vision is and trying to execute it. And by that, I mean, looking at really consensus seeking with Indigenous nations, and you've seen it come through with things like the High Title Recognition Agreement. For those who are not familiar, it's the first time through legislation title has been recognized, and BC led the way. The feds followed because the feds are always, frankly, a little slower. And that's just the nature of the public service as well as the system it works. It's not a I would say, a slight on them. And then you look at things like Indigenous conservation protection areas as well. And so, BC again has led the way on that, and it hasn't really shied away from taking some of those, I would say, ambitious, from a, I would say, non-Indigenous perspective steps. And then you have consent-based decision agreements like the ones Tahltan Nation has with Skeena Resources, with the Newmonts of the world. And so that's BC. The feds, I think, in large part, have also taken on that consensus-seeking approach, and where I see it most is the Impact Assessment Agency. So again, remember, I've got a resources background, so I'm going to be very biased towards that. But then you also have things like the child and welfare legislation that was passed, which is a call to action number one. And really looking at self-determination by nations of their families and children. I think that piece of legislation is truly innovative in terms of what it's doing, what it's meant to do. And I think it hasn't received the attention it ought to in terms of where potential innovation can occur in this space. In terms of the current sphere as well, you've got the 10 principles between government and Indigenous peoples that guides our relationships. Those continue to be implemented at the federal level, and you do see it percolating in some of the policies as well as the litigation, or rather lack of litigation that's occurring in this space. And of course, our colleagues from the CIB are here, the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program. Sean Fentanoff, if you don't know him, he can raise his hand, and along with Varun, did a huge part in that, and I'd like to embarrass him quite a bit. The Canada Growth Fund, I mean, these are, that's the current state, and that's a lot that's been done right now. I won't forget my friends in Alberta and Ontario, where I also practice a lot. In Alberta and Ontario, I think where we focused in terms of the current state is really looking at economic growth in Indigenous communities through either equity ownership or other facilitating, including through the consultation model, trying to get nations engaged. And I think where it, to me, I bifurcate the two, right? There's the equity piece, and then there is the Section 35 rights piece. On the Section 35 rights piece, Alberta and Ontario have taken a different tack to BC. They continue to look at the traditional consultation model, and accommodation model, and continuing, again, trying to sort of pivot towards the economic growth and economic opportunity piece as the means by which rights are recognized. But I don't think that can hold true for too long, and we'll get to that a little bit more, because I do see the influence of good old BC coming out across Canada, including the Maritimes. In terms of industry, and I know Tabitha sort of touched on this as well, I think a lot of it has been driven by risk management, and not just reactive, but also risk management from perspective of realizing opportunities. Either it's been through, looking at, like when we talk about, everybody talks about early engagement, right? Any conference you go to, go do early engagement, like as if it's the panacea of everything. It's like, what does that actually entail? What are you meant to do? What does having 2 ears and listening mean? And that stuff takes a lot of practice, and it's hard stuff. Like, it's easy to say, really hard to do in practice. But I think industry has eliminated some of the bias, at least the ones I've worked with, around looking at nations as, almost a hurdle, but looking at it as a government. And when you frame it as a government, then you don't care if it's a provincial government or federal government. It's a government, and it's another nation that, on a rights basis as well as a government basis, that you engage with, you consult with, you respect on a nation-to-nation basis. And so there's that risk management exercise, but there's also been the ESG-related matters. I know that's a dirty word down south, but I think that has also led to the Ubers of the world and others looking at how do they actually contribute to this space. And I think that has impacted Call to Action 92 as well. So I did preface, and I put that little asterisk, that's all lawyers do, going, this is prior to the election. The reason I say that, because I do think we're at a pivotal time right now. In British Columbia, the government had a near, almost a defeat, and the Premier said, I think, and I think his comments were taken a little bit out of context, so please, the context is always important, but said, maybe we were too focused on reconciliation in our last term as government. Now, I think the comment there was he didn't bring along, or the government didn't bring along, the rest of the population. And so you saw a rise in things like UNDRIP cases against the UNDRIP legislation that we have in British Columbia. You have a rise in cases where people are pushing back on land acknowledgement, saying it's political statements. To be blunt, I think that's stupid. That's a legal term, and you can quote me on that, because Section 35 is not a political argument. That's what exists, and the rights existed according to international law. So, I don't know, go sue me for that. But you have that discourse coming up, and I think it's because the learning and the collective sort of piece has been missed, right? And so back to my point, which, again, I should look at my notes, but the pivotal piece that we're in, we're talking about, how do we fast-track projects or prioritize projects? And it seems like we're all placing our bets on equity ownership. And I know, we've discussed this before as well, but if you don't really appreciate the rights-based assessment and why the rights exist and the international human rights instruments like UNDRIP, I think we're going to be repeating the mistakes of the past. So I hope there's a little bit more. Whoever clapped, thank you so much. I needed that. That's a huge boost. Yes. Okay. That really boosted my ego, so I appreciate that a whole bunch. So I think, in terms of the pivotal moment in time, I hope a lot of it is a little bit of sort of giving those that have felt alienated something to chew on. But I do hope that in implementing it, we're not erasing some of the lessons we've learned as to why we ended up in the first place where we are, why we ended up having the policies in place that we put into place. And I'm not saying it's perfect, far from it, frankly, and a lot of it needs to morph, but I'm a little bit more forgiving because I have aged slightly in the last 30 years in my life, but in the sense that, you learn from continuous improvement, you learn from trial and error. So give the public service a little bit of room to breathe. Give them the time to go, we might have gone way too much risk averse here because, like we had a zero tolerance for risk. We're going to have to scale that back. So I think we need, where we are right now is really critical, and I hope we can touch on that when we come to the last point around where we go.
Yeah, I think Sharon's points are a really good segue to you, Varun. Do you want to take this from here?
For sure. So I think this is, as Sharon and Tabitha mentioned, it's a crucial moment. It's a hinge moment, as our Prime Minister often likes to say. But it's a moment of opportunity in I guess, two different frames. I think from the capital perspective, which we as a bank, we think a lot about and sweat a lot about, there's been a lot of progress in the last 10 years and the last year, really. There were 3 loan guarantee programs that were announced from before 2024 when we had, I think, $4 or $5 billion worth of concessional financing tools to now $22 billion. That's a pretty substantial jump in just a year. So I think we are very fully, if not substantially, in the ownership economy, in the Indigenous ownership economy, and that is something that we see as, ownership being table stakes. It is kind of the starting point of many, if not most, of these discussions, and we can talk a bit about risk and where ownership makes sense and maybe it doesn't. I would also agree that ownership is not a panacea. It's not a silver bullet, and it is solely a brick in the wall of rebuilding and repairing the wrongs of the past. One of the more compelling understandings of reconciliation I've found is the Heiltsuk. Their term for reconciliation is Heisistud, which is turning things around and making it right. And for them, and I've worked with them closely on understanding what they mean by that, it is a process by which Canada comes to the feet of Indigenous nations and learns and listens and understands and figures out a way to repair and turn things right again. So that is that might be a lifelong project if you think about the arc of Canada as a country as a whole. But for us, this is not something that's going away. We see this as part of the Constitution, big C and small c, of our country and its makeup. And for us as a bank, it just means that we lean in further in trying to advance that dialogue from a policy perspective, but also actually baking that into how we are actually doing our work in financing and enabling many of these opportunities where we recognize that there's not always been a positive or constructive or just a genuinely respectful relationship.
Great, thank you. Interestingly enough, when you say ownership is not the way for everyone, Cody has something to say about that. I won't spoil it. Cody, take it away.
Man, how do I follow you three up? This is going last is a tough one. Where we've come from and where things were, sorry. So I'm a miner. I work in the mining space. As I mentioned, I used to work underground and kind of come up through the entire process to being able to chat with all you lovely people on a stage here, which is much better than eating a sandwich on a muck pile underground. So, I mean, if you look at the mining space, you look back, 80 years ago, and a company comes onto the land and basically take the resources, and there's not a whole lot given back to the local groups, right? There's no IBAs. There might be some jobs, this and that. Then we kind of move forward, and we get to a place where, okay, you got jobs, right? Maybe we'll give you a little bit of cash every year. Fantastic, right on. And then the IBA, the impact benefit agreements and other agreements progress. It's okay, now we have some businesses coming out as this thing, and the payments are getting better. I work in a royalty company, so I always refer to that, but now they're part of profit and things like that. And now we've kind of come to a place where Indigenous inclusion on some of these mines is very integral to the project itself. You have Indigenous groups that own portions of the value chain like infrastructure, so power lines, large companies doing a lot of the contracting work on the mine sites, such as I work for the Tahltan Nation Development Corporation. We do all the tailings lifts, and we own a company that has gravel around it, power lines, fiber optic, and everything around the mine. That stuff, that never used to happen. And when people think of projects, they usually just think of equity on the project itself. But what about the value chain surrounding the thing? What about that? Because we've come a long way in leveraging debt. And a lot of groups are leveraging private equity. You look at groups in Alberta, groups out east. I just had a really cool call with the Southern Ute not long ago, and they have a whole bunch of private equity investments where they're actually putting their capital into different funds for a return. So you have, we've come from a place where there are no real agreements to a place where we have very comprehensive agreements. Shout out to Agnico and a couple of our really good companies that we have in Canada that like make these agreements that really allow groups to prosper and grow and own pieces of infrastructure, deploy capital for good returns, and so on and so forth. So that's great. We got to a place where we own some of the equity around it. We have these businesses operating. We have great agreements. And then you're starting to see things in the mining sector and in a ton, I mean, sitting up here with the boss of the thing here, in a ton of other sectors, but in the mining space, you're starting to see Indigenous groups buy, and we're going to start to build mines. So you look up in the Yukon, and the past-producing Minto mine, it's an old copper mine, was bought by the Selkirk First Nation. You look in Manitoba, and the Norway House First Nation bought the Power Nickel project. And you look on stage, and I work for a company called Nations Royalty, where we're a publicly traded company, and we use money, we use royalty agreements through impact benefit agreements and try to leverage those and create more wealth much quicker for Indigenous groups. So, you know, we come from a place where there are no agreements to a place where we're starting to build assets and own all the infrastructure around it and run the businesses that operate and build these things, which I think is really cool. And I'm going to end it there. That's it.
All right, I said it was my, it's okay, don't leave it. I said it was my responsibility to keep us on track, and I just got slipped a note saying that we have 8 minutes left, which is now 7 minutes left. I think we may have gotten started a little later than usual. So we're gonna skip the where we were 10 years ago, because everyone knows, you know, how bad it was or how worse it was than we are today. So kudos to everyone for moving the dial here to today, great job. But I think we'll use our last 6 or 7 minutes together to go through 90 seconds each. Where are we in 10 years from now, and what do we need to do to get there? I'm assuming it's good and better than when we are right now. I'll preface that. But yeah, 90 seconds each. Who wants to start?
You're looking at me. And the only thing I'm going to say is I don't think 10 years ago was that bad. I think it sowed the seeds for what we have today. No relationship is more important to me than that with Indigenous people. I think the mandate letter has said. Jody Wilson-Rainboard, minister as well at that 2015. So where will we be in 10 years? Socioeconomic indicators will continue to improve. Infrastructure deficit hopefully will continue to improve. I don't think it'll be solved. Some of the Indian Act constraints will continue to be removed. We'll make progress around truly balancing the public interest and Indigenous participation. We'll have those hard conversations where we can't get consent on linear projects from all the nations. And what does that look like, rather than thinking that we're going to get consent 100% of the time. We're going to get some clarity on UNDRIP and what it means from the Cabot decision that's going to Supreme Court. Also, a lot of cumulative effects treaties cases that we're going to get. And what else? Oh, Haida title agreement, Sokoteen, in terms of their title recognition, how that braiding of both Indigenous laws and Indigenous self-government, as well as Canadian laws, will go, because it's literally in the first year. We may have scrapped UNDRIP by then, and not because the government doesn't believe in UNDRIP, but I think hopefully by then everybody recognizes that it's international human rights and it doesn't actually really need legislation to implement it. 90 seconds.
And very impressive. That deserves an applause.
Sure.
It really does. All right, Cody.
I think it would be great to see a couple multi-billion-dollar Indigenous-owned companies. Public, private, all sorts. I think that we have the opportunity available right now. Depends how we seize it as Indigenous people. We have to deploy capital appropriately. We have to create governance models that allow that to grow and to make sure it's secure. And I think the opportunity is available to us right now. So I think it would be amazing to see some large public, private companies that are building capacity, that have Indigenous management, Indigenous governance, and the board of directors, and ownership. And I don't see why it's not possible. I think we're helping lead the way in the public space. Obviously, we're just one type of capital. And you're starting to see an ecosystem of Indigenous financial tools, Cedar Leaf, Longhouse, all these different loan-backed guarantees. And I think we can get to a place where Indigenous money is starting to be deployed into these projects as well. So we're actually managing our own wealth and deploying it into these companies and these capital, because you're seeing large land claims come by. You know, once again, talk with the Southern Ute, I think they have like a $7 or $8 billion trust, or multiple obviously, but kind of assets under management. And once we start deploying that capital, I could see a real big boost coming to Indigenous people in the Canadian economy. So that's what I'd like to see.
Awesome. I love it. Ambition. Tabitha.
Sure. Maybe I'll focus on what I think is needed to get there. We talked a little bit about TRC 92, and that's just one call within the 94 calls, and we really need to look at the whole ecosystem if we're going to continue to move economy and business and corporations. Education, I see Willa here in Connected North. We need to move on investing in education for Indigenous youth so that they can get into business and become entrepreneurs and continue to be resilient. Infrastructure, we need to close the infrastructure gap. It's very difficult to build business in communities when you don't have the power or the fiber or the broadband to be able to do that, or you're being evacuated consistently. We need to be at decision-making tables, and that means in policy development, in conversations around business, around policy, and in boardroom tables as well, as Cody said. We're seeing a rise of Indigenous leaders at boardroom tables, but we need to be in those decision-making positions. And policy. We see Corporate Canada, and Corporate Canada has really led the way on so much of supporting Indigenous business, definitely on procurement, way ahead of government procurement from Corporate Canada. And when we see policies come out that might push us backwards, like some of the policies that are coming out of BC and Ontario and fast-tracking projects, we need Corporate Canada to stand up and be accomplices and say these projects aren't going to go faster without Indigenous partnerships. And they need to be there at the table with us in talking to government and with the ORC, so he's not standing up there by himself all the time. And then just as Canadians, as investors and consumers, to really put pressure on corporations and on government to ensure that you're working with businesses, investing in businesses, buying from businesses that are supporting the Indigenous economy. And we're seeing that have traction in the US, where so many corporations are pushing against anti-DEI policies, and we need to ensure that we're doing the same thing here.
All right, Varun, 20 seconds. That's what you get for going last.
Yeah. So just in the next 10 years, we estimate that the capital gap for Canada is $340 billion just in infrastructure, critical minerals, and clean energy. Of that, $98 billion of equity opportunities are in the works for Indigenous nations in the energy and natural resources sector only, and that's just those two sectors, and the opportunities go beyond that. What's needed for the next 10 years is a conversation around Indigenous capital, capacity, and consent. You cannot have a conversation about economic reconciliation without all three of those factors, ideas at the table, and all three being advanced concurrently, and they cannot be advanced just solo. And the last thing is, and this is a call to action to this room, is education. Start by reading a copy of the TRC Calls to Action. Start by reading about Indigenous histories and economy, and start by learning about the legacy of colonialism in this country. It starts with all of you, genuinely, and I hope that everyone here takes that to heart.
Yeah, very good. All right, I'm going to do a rapid fire here and ask each of you to share with the room and those online if they have thoughts, to follow up with each of you. Where can they find you? How do they get a hold of you?
Sharon Singh with an H. McMillan. Google it.
Very good. Cody?
Man, LinkedIn, Facebook, call me.
Ting Tong.
We got my email is on our website. Feel free to reach out anytime. I'm always active on LinkedIn.
And often the tallest guy in the room, so really hard to miss.
Hard to miss and forget. Yeah.
Tabitha?
You can connect through our website, www.ccib.ca. And we have an e-newsletter you can sign up for that goes to over 10,000 people that continues to share all the news on Indigenous business.
You can reach out to me by email, varun.srivatsan@rbc.com, or you can reach out to me by LinkedIn, and you can follow our work at RBC Thought Leadership.
All right, thanks so much for joining us. Those of you who have questions for me, I'm at Macdonald Laurier Institute. Reach out to me, I'm online there, whatnot. Keep the conversation going. It's June. It's okay to raise Indigenous anything at any table, anywhere, even in your own home at your own kitchen table. So keep the conversation going, challenge ourselves of what we can do to move the dial forward. Thanks, everyone.
Good job.
Great. Oh, yes. It's okay. On behalf of Canadian Club Toronto, I want to thank our expert panel, Sharon, Cody, Tabitha, and Varun, for your insightful analysis of progress that has occurred over the last decade on issues of economic reconciliation. We appreciated your honest assessment of the heavy lifting that still needs to be done to achieve the goals of corporate reconciliation. There's hope buoyed by your outstanding leadership. Thank you. Please accept our best wishes for continued success in your respective roles. And Karen, thank you for your expert moderation and dedication to the club. We hope you will continue to help us bring these important discussions to Canada's podium. Before we close, we have a couple of upcoming events you won't want to miss. On June 12th, we welcome the Honorable Stephen Lecce, Minister of Energy and Mines, and the evening of June 18th, we will host our annual Pride celebration. Please visit our website, canadianclub.org, for information, and consider becoming a member if you haven't already done so. We offer access to our events on demand and live stream for free. I would like to offer another round of thanks to our event sponsor, Deloitte, and our streaming sponsor, Canada Life. And finally, I would like to thank our AV supplier, VBC Live, for your professional and reliable support of today's event. Members and guests, thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon.